Booyakasha. Let's get the ball rolling. G roller, 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 roller. G roller, 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 roller. G roller, roller, roller. Dragon Ball Z. Ayan na guys. Narinig niyo ba ako? Ba't parang nakahang ako dyan sa Facebook? Am I there? Do you see me? Hello universe. Medyo ano tayo today Try natin cover a couple of different angles guys. Medyo lecture mode tayo ng konti today. Obviously, if you really want in-depth analysis ng mga bagay-bagay sa mundo, don't worry about it guys. For, of course, exclusively sa ating mga members sa YouTube, we're gonna finally, hopefully soon, upload a couple of medyo long-form lectures, whether on Orientalism, ideas of Edward Said, medyo of Franz Fanon. We're gonna have also a little bit of analysis of works of Murakami, works of Hemingway. So may literally philosophical analysis tayo. So that will be exclusive for our Kometas on our YouTube channel. Richard Hidarian Deep Dive, right? Or at Deep Dive RH Richard Hidarian. So please lang, as you may know, yung mga members natin, special members natin sa ating YouTube community ay may access na doon sa ating Cool Pals episode with Sir Ronald Diamas. So that was just exclusive, of course, para sa ating mga minamahal pa rin na mga membro. Of course, ngayon, lalo kang mamahalin kung contractor ka. Talagang tanong ngayon is, hindi na tall, dark, and handsome. Ang hanap ngayon, tall, dark, and contractor. Or nauna pa, contractor, medyo dark, medyo tall, medyo ganun ang kayang, 700,000 ang kayang resibo. Diba? Yan ang mga, natin ngayon. Diba? Hinahanap na ngayon sa mga dating sites. Contractor. Pag nilagay mo siguro contractor, ikaw unang lalabas sa algorithm, no? Grabe talaga. Panalo ka na sa dating world. Basta lalo kung contractor, o, 'di ba? Pati nga yung mga district engineer ngayon, poging-pogi yan siguro sa mga ating dating sites. Baka naman, 'di ba? Baka naman. So, anyways guys, just to give you a flavor of the kind of medyo intellectual, academic style, but nonetheless, no, I would say informative, public, intellectual interventions kind of discussions. Today, pag-usapan natin itong tinatawag ko na moral politik, no? Ito ay isang bagay na pinag-usapan ko for a very long time. In fact, I described the Aquino administration as a classic case of moral politik. And when I say moral politik, it doesn't mean na sila lang may moralidad or disente or gano'n. Although marami naman tayong pa-disente effect na gano'n. But what I'm saying is that it's a brand of politics which is very, very common sa Pilipinas kung saan basically everything is reduced to this kind of moralistic prism. Kung saan good or evil, lahat ng ito mga contractor ay mga supposedly evil at tayo po ay lahat tayo mga anghel, di ba? Kaya gusto ko yung sinabi ni Mayor Vico na wag naman tayo magmamalinis dyan. It's not about you directly benefiting from, right, from corruption or not. It's more a question of may ginawa ka ba to stop corruption, right? May ginawa ka ba to shame yung mga corrupt individuals? May ginawa ka ba to actually make corruption more difficult, right? May ginawa ka ba para magkaroon ng accountability pagdating sa corruption, right? So, yung sinasabi nila na, well, actually, yung nakakadiri, nagsimula kay Jingoy yan Si Jingoy Estrada nagsabi, nakakadiri kayo, di ba? Kaya magpasalamat tayo. Guys, wag naman kayong ganon. Yung may parating yung binibigyan ng credit, yung mga, di ba? Bigyan ng credit si Jingoy. Siya yung nagsimula niyan, di ba? Siya yung nagsimula yan na, na nakakadiri daw, di ba? Jingoy Estrada, diba? Nakakadiri daw kayo, di ba? Nakakadiri daw ang corruption. So, the thing I want to talk about today is that that's more or less a form of what I call moral politic. This idea na, ang linis natin, perfecto tayo sila kadiri, di ba? Or parang pag pinag-usapan natin itong mga contractors, itong mga kababalagan nangyari, itong si ito yung mga grabe, inspiring talaga, no? Itong mga robs to riches, di ba? Mga robs to riches natin na kaibigan. Grabe, nakaka-inspire. Imagine mo guys, British accent pa pala. At saan ka pa? Hindi lang British accent. Ano pala, achievement pala guys ang British accent. Oh, 'di ba? Parang bookish na rin eh. Sabi nga ng asawa, diskarte lang, hindi kailangan maging inhinyero, pero kung ikaw po ay may achievement ka naman sa buhay, which is may British kang accent, conversation, sorry, hindi ko talaga
with using our British accent. So we converse.
We converse.
In English. I even converse with my kids in my accent, and they understand both the British accent as well as the American English accent. Ay, palakpakan!
yung palakpakan talaga hindi ko nakayanan eh. May palakpakan talaga eh.
So we converse in English. I even
Schedule,
converse with my kids
military,
in my accent,
military,
and they understand
schedule,
both the British accent as well as the
American
English
accent.
Ay, palakpakan!
Palakpakan guys! Achievement na pala. Achievement pala itong British accent, ha? Kasi, wala. Sorry guys, ha? Yun ang actually mas naano ko sa palakpakan eh. Parang, wait, achievement pala yung medyo fake British accent. Tapos yung, for me, there's only one kind of American accent that I really appreciate. I really think is an amazing American accent. Isa lang accent na gusto ko eh. Yung, nasan yung shades natin? Ito. Ito yung pinakaka. Good morning. Good morning. Ako po si Ben Tulfa. Been 20 years in journalism. Yan talaga yung favorite kong American. Kita tayo sa abandoned warehouse. Abandoned. Ganun pala siya, no? Abandoned. So yun guys. Achievement din yan. O nga pala, no? Hindi siya American. It's American. Good morning. Pero tayo naman guys, paborito po talaga natin ever since paborito natin is the greatest president in the universe. Number one, yung Italian yung ganun niya. Pero yung accent niya is very so New York, amazing, wonderful. Anyway, let's get down to business. What I want to talk about this is, okay, tama lang, okay lang, pagtawanan natin. Ito na nga lang mga gawa natin eh. Habang sila ay nag-enjoy sa may libreng umbrella, na Hermes yung leather, na Rolls-Royce. Kaya pala mahilig sa Rolls-Royce, no? Kasi, conversing in British. Siguro yung elevator nila, British accent din. Kasi napansin ko dun sa Cebu, no? Yung sa announcement sa airport, talagang British accent. So siguro kung social ka talaga, pati yung kotse mo, pagbuksan mo, di ba? Good morning. Nasira sa Trump. Hindi ko magawa yung British accent, eh. Your schedule today. Ganun na. Anyway, guys, nasira talaga kay Trump yung accent ko. Hindi ko na kaya, eh. I just have one accent. Dati talaga bentul from abandoned. Okay, ito guys. Kidding aside, let's get serious. So, ang gusto natin pag-usapan over the next 15 minutes or so kasi kailangan ko umabol sa gym. Mahirap na. We need to preserve our great, amazing, beautiful figure. So, in light of that, guys, mamaya pag-usapan natin a couple of things. So, I want to look at a couple of important academic works which I feel really shed light dito sa issue na gusto natin pag-usapan. One is John Seidel, whom I mentioned, whose work I mentioned, dun sa, nagiging bentul. Yan kasi. Okay. Yung whose work we mentioned dun sa discussion natin with Sir Apa Ongpin, the executive director of Makati Business Club, the other day. So John Seidel is actually the protege of another great political scientist, Benedict Anderson. These are two of the finest minds who paid attention to Philippine politics, and particularly the concepts of cacique democracy and bossism. Pag-usapan natin very shortly, hindi naman TikTok level short, but short enough kasi kailangan natin humabol. And sorry, medyo late tayo nagsimula, no? Ang dami natin hinahabol. Obligations. And then I want to also talk about why just moral indignation is not enough. If anything, moral indignation alone is actually counterproductive. We have to go beyond moral indignation and actually do something about it institutionally. Pag pinag-usapan natin institutions, normally in social sciences, particularly in political science, institutions are understood as human-designed sets of activities and practices which are meant to create certain favorable outcomes. No, so for instance, you create the military, the British accent. You create the military as an institution to protect, for instance, national security, right? And it's regularized over time. May regular army ka, may regular practices ka, may standard operating procedures ka, etc. Right? So yun. So pag-usapan natin, guys, why just obsessing over the issue of corruption and reducing politics to just moral indignation are not only almost useless in terms of actual outcome of making the Philippines better, but actually it's misleading sometimes and could be also counterproductive. So we need to talk about solutions. And when you talk about solutions, you have to talk about policies. So what are policies? Policies are specific, right? Plans or targets and interventions by state institutions to address a specific problem, right? Within given space and time. So pag-usapan natin yan. So accordingly, guys, una-una, as I said, there's no reason whatsoever for us to underestimate yung problema ng corruption sa ating bansa. Absolutely, corruption is evil. No question about it. So bago yung mga walang hiya na naman yung mga local economists, iba dyan na haters natin na iibay na naman yung sinasabi natin, let me absolutely make it clear. We are against corruption 100%. But if your analysis just stops there, then you're really not a good analyst. You're not really a good thinker, not to mention you're not really a good economist, most probably, right? Because if you look at world-class literature on political economy and development, the issue is far more complicated than just corruption per se. Because unang-una, corruption comes in many, many different forms, right? There's so-called access corruption. So this is the kind of corruption whereby, let's say, yung mga kumpanya nagbabayad ng pera para makaroon ng meeting sa isang minister to be able to build a certain factory. So actually, it's corruption, it's evil. At the same time, it leads to the creation of factories and jobs. And then there's a kind of corrosive Swiss bank, Cayman Islands, 40 cars, luxury car with Rolls-Royce and umbrella, Hermes leather kind of corruption, which obviously is absolutely corrosive and deplorable and economically devastating, right? So there are levels of corruption and there are kinds of corruption. But in terms of levels of corruption, actually, when you look at the Philippines, we're not totally unique. Again, this is not supposed to be actually this is not an exhaustive, it probably is going to take me 3 to 4 hours of proper lecture, so we go to the meat of the matter. Pero, just to give you an idea, let's compare, for instance, Philippines and Thailand, right? So if you compare Philippines and Thailand, right, the levels of corruption are actually not too far away. And yet, if you look at the level of development of Thailand, medyo malayo tayo sa kanila. Right? So if you look at the rankings, perceptions of corruption, Philippines is more or less at the same level as Thailand, also Vietnam, etc. But if you look at it, those countries are all more developed than us, or recently became more developed than us, or way more dynamic than us. So obviously there are other factors at play here, right? Kaya mahalaga yan for us to pay attention to that. But before going to that, I want to talk about something that I believe is very important, which is bakit hindi pwede hanggang moral indignation lang tayo, right? I'm saying this because nung panahon na medyo mas bata-bata pa tayo, bata pa naman tayo, but yung medyo mas pa naman tayo, mas presko pa tayo, we were really gripped by etong Napoles issue. This Napoles issue was really something that shook us to the core. And what happened there is that actually, lumabas kami. So there was that Luneta 1 million strong. I'm not sure 1 million talaga, baka hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands lumabas. Pero lahat kami pumunta dyan sa Luneta to express our disappointment. This is more than 10, this is more than 10 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And nung panahon na yan, guys, we were really angry. We were really, really angry. And ito rin yung panahon kung kailan si Pinoy was the president. And we felt that, Pinoy was not doing enough, or that dapat panindigan ni Pinoy yan because, well, daan matuwid siya, di ba? So something has to be done about it. Now, in fairness naman to Pinoy, there was something done about it. Eventually, at least 3 senators, kilala niyo yung mga yan. Yung isa nga nandyan pa rin, yung isa nga buhay pa, yung isa naman bitter pa rin dun sa talent. They were basically put behind bars. And accused of massive corruption. And then you had the case of Janet Napoles, not to mention the chief of staff and a number of other people who were involved, allegedly dun sa PDAF, diba? That whole PDAF thing. This is more than 12 years ago. And if you're interested, actually I wrote something about it. I'm trying to pull that out. Hindi ko alam ba't hindi lumalabas ito. Sorry guys, I'm trying to figure out the technicality. Hindi ko rin nilabas pa yung yung AI na yung nag-face tracker sa akin. Kanina ko pa tinitry na tanggalin pero hindi ko matanggal-tanggal. So, actually, ito imagine mo. Noon pa lang, I wrote something about it. This is, of course, the malversation case against Janet Napoles and a number of other legislators. But you can see exactly where my argument is going, right? So, sobrang grabe, sobrang garapalan yung corruption na nangyari. So, this was my piece for Huffington Post. This is how I started really writing for public consumption. By the way, libre yan, wala kaming bayad, talagang taos puso. So, I called that the Luneta Revolution. Obviously, a little bit exaggerated and all. But the whole point was that ito yung pinakamalaking corruption scandal sa panahon namin. And nung time na yun, the Philippines was quite an underdeveloped country. Even compared to now, our per capita incomes were not even $3,000 per head. Poverty levels were very high. We had 10 years of the Arroyo administration. Lots of scandals and alleged corruption and misuse and abuse of power. So, halfway into the Aquino administration, ang sinasabi namin is, we have to do something about it. And something was supposed to be done about it. And then what happened? Right? And then what happened? Anong nangyari dun sa tatlong senador na yan? Eventually, they'll be pardoned and they'll be out. Yung isa nga convicted na nga, nandyan pa rin. Siya pa yung nandidiri sa corruption. Now, to make it even fair, because let's talk about both sides of the uniteam, right? Look at the impunity in our system. Forget about ERAP. Forget about Arroyo, right? All of these ex-presidents who faced massive corruption scandals and all. Look at this one. The former First Lady. She was found guilty by no less than the highest court in the land. Convicted siya of graft. In fact, sentenced siya to prison by the highest court of the land. And then what happened? So, yan ang point ko. I completely agree with Vico Soto na we should demonize corruption. Absolutely, because evil ang corruption. I completely agree with him that we have to call out people who we believe are have crossed the line, and in some cases proven beyond reasonable doubt that they crossed the line. In fact, interestingly, as early as 2021, nung nanalo ng award, yung special good governance award by the US State Department, si Vico Soto, he said you have to denormalize corruption. Right? Now, basically saying we should demonize corruption. So, anti-corruption is something we have been hearing forever. Panahon pa ni Pinoy yan. Pinaka-first sona ni Pinoy, fighting against corruption was front and center. Jesse Robredo's time pa lang, as the greatest mayor in the Philippines, arguably, he was against corruption. So, what I'm saying is that itong problema ng corruption is age-old. We'll discuss that more when I go to Kasika Democracy and Bossism, and I'll explain to you ano yung roots ng corruption in Philippines. But outrage at corruption is also like since forever. This is nothing new. And this is nothing new because I know about it. We wrote about this thing. I wrote about the so-called Luneta Revolution in 2013. Nung galit na galit kami kay Napoles. And then what happened? Was any big fish held accountable at all? How many ex-president, ex-senators, ex-high-level officials who were even convicted of a certain crime? Right? Despite all of the mumbo-jumbo in our system, right? Na-convict pa rin sila. How many of them really paid the price for it? Kaya ako, yes, call it out. Moral outrage is fantastic. But you know what's more important to me? Accountability. And accountability requires kailangan ng concrete policies. Kailangan ng concrete institutional development. Otherwise, nag-iingay-ingay lang tayo dito at walang nangyari. Right? This is what I'm talking about, guys. This is what I'm talking about. So when I see now people super outraged by politics and all, parang gusto kong sabihin, kahapon ba kayo pinanak? Yung mga kabataan, naintindihan ko pa kasi batang-bata pa talaga sila. Siguro hindi pa sila namulat nung panahon ni Napoles. Pero yung mga katulad namin na medyo mas matanda-tanda, we remember very well. This was the defining moment in our political consciousness. Galit na galit kami talaga sa corruption. Right? And we came out. Million-strong anti-corruption rally. Yun ang ginawa namin. Not literally millions siguro lumabas, but tens of thousands at least. I saw that with my own eyes. I still have pictures. So ang point ko is, it's 2025, andun pa rin sa stage ng moral outrage. Kung 5 stages of grief yan, nandun ka pa rin sa stage 1 or 2, ano bang stage yung rage? Diba? Denial and rage, diba? We're just stuck at that stage. Dapat lampas na tayo sa acceptance, sa solutions phase na tayo ngayon eh. So honestly, instead of being really happy and encouraged, I'm saying like, wait, ngayon lang kayo na outrage sa corruption? My goodness, ang tagal-tagal na tong problema ng corruption. Tagal na nagalit tayo dito. That's why my worry is, 1 month, 2 months from now, iba na naman yung news cycle, nakalimutan na naman ng tao. Now, speaking of yung mga DDS troll na pumapasok, kaya po tayo bumabalik-balik dito sa issue ng corruption throughout different administrations. Now, PBM still has to prove himself, but at least he reopened the conversation. Walang ya. Under the previous administration, we didn't even have any serious discussion of corruption. Sabi nga niya, whiff of corruption, ganun. Tapos, kung titignan mo naman yung track record ng previous administration, ke-horror. Diba? Sobrang ke-horror. Katulad nga sinabi ni Apang Ompin, isa sa mga pinaka-corrupt na administration siguro yan kung titignan mo yung objective indicators and all of that. You look at international rankings and all of that. Ang tagal na itong issue ng corruption. Ang tagal na natin galit dito sa issue ng corruption. When are we gonna go beyond moral outrage? Hanggang kailan lang ba and we talk about corruption as if nangyari ngayon lang yung corruption na yan. Parang, wait, did we forget the past 20, 30 years? Oh, by the way, did we forget the Marcos Sr. era corruption? What the heck? Ano tayo, kahapon lang tayo pinanak, paulit-ulit lang tayo. What is this? You know, one of the great things that Niccolo Machiavelli said was that, you know, traditional societies operate in cyclical way. You know, like parang yung political memories nila is cyclical. Forgive, forget, crisis, forgive, forget, crisis. Hindi tayo nag-move on. We don't move on because we forget immediately, and sometimes we forgive immediately, and sometimes we don't know if we forget because we forgave or forgave because we forgot. Right? Kaya ako, pabalik-balik ako sa ano eh. Pag-usapan natin, what happened during Digong? What happened during event Pinoy? Let's talk about it. Because this moral outrage and all of that, useless yan. Kung ano eh, if it's not put within a specific context, historical context, if it comes out as if ngayon lang tayong namulat sa corruption, as if hindi natin alam ng matagal-tagal yan. And if this is not followed up by really solid accountability measures. I mean, again, kaya nga sabi ko, plastic na plastic ako dun sa may ibang taong ingay-ingay nila sa corruption ngayon, tapos kakalimutan nila itong mga corruption ng mga dating administration or alleged dating administration. Ito, 2019 pa lang, there was a 332 billion flood fund alleged scam. You can find this on Philippine Star. 2019 sinulat yan, ha? So, dun sa mga tabed na troll na sinasabi na bayaran, this was written during your Amos time. Although, anyway, na-archive naman siya and all. So, never mind. But, you get what I'm saying? Pag-usapan natin. Diba? This is what I'm talking about, guys. So, first of all, bakit we're still stuck at the level of outrage? Moral outrage lang tayo. We have to move forward. Pangalawa, why are we only talking about corruption yesterday or today or this year or last year? Let's talk about corruption in the past 10, 15 years. From Napoles onwards. And then pangatlo, let's not talk about corruption as if tayo lang corrupt sa buong mundo at tayo lang hopeless sa buong mundo. Hello? Medyo mag-research naman kayo dyan. Unfortunately, yung mga ibang mga local economists dito, they don't do proper comparative analysis and all. Ole, let's look at the numbers here. Actually, if you look at the corruption problem in the Philippines, it's bad. Corruption is evil. Absolutely no question about it. But, sorry to say, we're not that unique also at the end of the day. If you don't believe me, go and check yung Transparency International. Ito, let me bring out the numbers, okay? Para you can see it. So, okay, so these are a couple of numbers. CPI. So you can see our rankings are, actually at some points we're better than Cambodia, not too far from Thailand and Vietnam, right? I'm not even gonna go and talk about the 1MDB scandal in Malaysia, right? So these are some of the graphs I'm gonna bring out for you to see. Diba? Facts first tayo, diba? Katulad ng kabilang channel. Facts first tayo. Although I don't know kung kabilang channel nagle-lecture sila ng ganitong ganyan. Anyway, hindi naman siya social scientist or anything. Ito, okay? This is the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, Table 1 and Table 3. You can check it out yourself, guys. Right? Let me show you. So, if you look at it, yes, Singapore is way ahead of us. Yes, some of our neighbors are way ahead of us, but not Vietnam. Not Thailand. In fact, let me bring out Thailand. Thailand's an interesting case. So Thailand actually's per capita income is between 70 to 80% higher than ours. It used to be actually twice higher than ours. But if you look at the level of corruption, actually, our rankings are very similar to Thailand. And dun sa table, you can see also the rankings of Vietnam, for instance. Right? And nakailan silang presidente na wala recently because of the corruption, explosion, and scandals and all. Again, these are countries that I'm very familiar with. I visit them. I've talked to their top officials. I talked to their top experts. So it's not like may nakita lang tayo sa, I don't know, Google and akala natin, alam natin itong mga bansa. Pinag-aralan natin ang mga bansa to. Alright? And if you look at it, these are the numbers that come out. You can see that corruption is a serious problem. Okay, so this is an interesting graph. Look at this graph, guy. So, Thailand is red, Philippines is purple. We're basically exactly at the same level of corruption, according to CPI. This is Philippines and Thailand. This is Philippines and Thailand. This is Philippines and Thailand. Look at it. Philippines and Thailand, almost exactly the same level of corruption. In fact, we're similar to Dominican Republic, Panama, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and of course, Thailand, right? Now, I'm not saying this is the most fascinating, most amazing, most beautiful grouping, but look at the economic growth and trajectory of these 4, 5, 6 countries. They're very different. So logically speaking, that means, first of all, we're not the most corrupt country in the world. Actually, corruption levels are similar to relatively developed countries like Thailand and relatively wealthy countries like Kazakhstan, I would say, who are upper middle income countries, almost high income countries, right? Sorry, I don't know. Sa kabilang channel ba may mga ganitong lecture? I don't think hindi naman social scientist yung kabila. So, anyways, so ako hindi lang ako nagrarant ng monologue. We give proper data and lecture. So these are the numbers you can see for yourself. You look at the CPI. Again, the Philippines is not uniquely corrupt. We're corrupt. Yes, corruption is very bad, but we're not like singularly most corrupt country in the world. I was like, the most corrupt country. Hindi tayo ganon. Inis na isa ko when yung mga iba na mga local economists, mga nandiyan kung ano pinagsasabi nila. We're not singularly bad. And if our corruption levels are similar to Thailand, and yet Thailand is growing, Thailand's twice wealthier than us. And by the way, you can go actually back in time and look at the case of South Korea, for instance. So this is a fantastic book I suggest. This is a book by Ha Jong Chan, a South Korean Cambridge-based economist. If you look at the case of South Korea, when they were at the same level of development than us, let's say per capita income of between $4,000 to $10,000, they had tremendously high corruption levels. In fact, until today, there's massive corruption scandal in Korea. In fact, one of their presidents, Park Geun-hye, not long ago was removed because of the massive corruption scandals, right? Yung Samsung family, etc. So again, bago tayo twist na naman yung mga walang yung mga dilawan na yung mga local economists diyan na nagfi-feeling ng turfing na pang ano lang naman yung level nila. Just be clear, corruption is evil, but let's put into perspective, Philippines is not singularly corrupt, right? I can go on and on, give you all of these different datas and numbers to show that actually, by global standards, we're definitely not the worst. We're bad, but definitely not the worst. So corruption alone doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why we're underdeveloped. It doesn't explain why we have been left behind. It absolutely, for me actually, corruption is also an effect more than a cause probably. Corruption is high because ang hina ng institutions natin. Corruption is high because ang hina ng middle class natin. Corruption is high because we don't have a very effective media in terms of not only exposing but really encouraging institutional reforms, right? So I can go on and on about it. So this is another number, this is another data. So I can show you all of this data, ASEAN comparisons, Philippines and other countries. Our rankings, to be honest, are not that different. In fact, our rankings are slightly even better than some of the other countries in the region. We're similar to Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. We're slightly even better than Cambodia. We're slightly higher than Laos. So actually, Myanmar also far away. It's really just Singapore and to a certain degree Malaysia, which are slightly better than us. So in short, I can give you a million different numbers here that show that we're not the most corrupt country in the world and that corruption is not unique to us. Because the moment we think that we're uniquely corrupt, tapos nang usapan. Hopeless case na tayo, let's just give up, forget about it. But that's actually just super ignorant and it's counterproductive. In fact, it's bad economic analysis. If you look at a lot of really cutting-edge studies right now, so both in political science and economics, right? This is a very good, so these two books I suggest as a very good counterpoint to that whole Acemoglu Robinson's good institution, blah, blah, blah. Because, Acemoglu Robinsons are good economists, but not really the best historians and all. And they don't have really any normative perspective. The economist that I suggest is a good friend of mine, Yuen Ang from the Johns Hopkins University, a Chinese-American political economist, very good economist. And she talks about actually China's own Gilded Age, wherein she draws parallels between corruption during the time of U.S. economic peak in late 19th century and China since the 1990s, basically. Ang basic argument is that there is so much corruption in China, but still growth is high because the type of corruption matters. It's what she calls access corruption. It's a kind of corruption that actually facilitates rapid economic growth. It's evil morally, but it's economically productive. Now, this is where I actually agree now. So, see, nuance ang take ko. This is where I actually agree with some of our local friends here, local economist friends, that yes, the type of corruption we have actually is bad. So if you look at the book Political Order and Political Decay by Fukuyama, he looks at, for instance, Max Weber's different typologies of corruption. Our type of corruption is the worst kind of corruption based on Max Weber's sociological understanding of corruption. It's not the kind of access corruption that Yuen Ang talks about. It's that kind of corrosive, not bookish, madiskarte, Hermes leather, Rolls-Royce car with umbrella kind of corruption, right? So again, we have to have a much more nuanced discussion about corruption, but more importantly, we have to have a discussion about corruption that also talks about solutions, right? Not only about ang sama-sama, this kind of moral politic, good versus evil, simplistic kind of discourse, honestly, it doesn't get us so very far in terms of solution. Because ako, as a student of policy and politics, I'm interested in solutions. And speaking of solution, guys, this is where moral outrage alone is not enough. Going on your, going on online and seeing celebrities getting so shocked, wow, very shocked, with corruption. The next thing, these are the same celebrities that you would see hobnobbing with politicians, dating the sons of politicians, going to the same yacht party with the anak ng politicians. These are the celebrities when they bump into each other in Paris Fashion Week. Dun sa mga alam naman na obvious na mga nepo kids, wala naman silang sinasabi, and then biglang ngayon lahat sila nag-moral posturing and all. You see that kind, yun yung ayoko eh. Yung ganyan posturing eh. Yung vacuous moralistic posturing. That's what I don't like. What I like are actual solution and something really done about it. So tama, kadiri ang corruption. We have to demonize it even. But we have to think about actual solutions, guys. At yun para sa akin ang mahalaga. Alright? Yun ang talaga mahalaga sa akin. Again, there's another graph here I have to show that, if in the greater scheme of things, if you adjust your aperture, diba? Again, the Philippines is, or not like the most corrupt country in the world. Like, look at this map of CPI. So our level of corruption is very similar to a huge number of countries. I can see Turkey there, I can see Russia there, I can see parts of Eastern Europe there, Central Europe there, parts of Latin America there. And if you look at these countries, some of them have they're twice richer than us in terms of per capita income. Some of them almost 3 times richer than us in terms of per capita income. So again, very simplistic. If you just say corruption alone explain everything, or we're the most corrupt people, or give any impression along those lines, the most corrupt budget, the worst budget, yung mga ganon. Sobrang simplistic, useless kinds of discussion. We should call out corruption. We should also call out yung mga artista, yung mga kaibigan natin na biglang ngayon kadiring-kadiri na sila sa mga nipo kids. Yung pala, nag-up-up lang naman sila back in the day, beshi-beshi lang sila, or I never saw them confronting other people. Ako, honestly, I could have easily been in any kind of rarefied local high society circus, really circus, rather than circle, but yuck, kadiri. I'd rather be with our global friends na the most educated and people with good hearts and progressive people, including literally progressive international friends natin and all. So, yun ang gusto kong sabihin. Matagal na alam natin na may corruption sa bansa natin. Sana mag-move on na tayo. Hindi tayo stuck at the level of moral outrage lang, as if kahapon lang tayo pinanak. Now, let me go a little bit deeper. Again, sorry I'm going a little bit fast about this. If we have time, maybe in future, especially for our members of our community in YouTube, I'll give a much more detailed analysis, particularly looking at the 2 key works that I think are very useful in making us understand bakit ang taas ng corruption level sa Pilipinas. Regardless, right? So look at it. I have 10 layers to my argument, right? It's like, it's not only corruption. What level of corruption? How does it compare? What kind of corruption? What is the genesis of the corruption? Why is it persistent? Like, that's proper analysis, guys. If you're a serious thinker, that's how you do it. And I'm sorry, I don't see many people are doing that level of analysis. Sobrang konti lang. Alright? Don't worry, guys. Yung mga nagsabi na medyo maliit yung ibang graphs, I'll post them sa baba. You will be able to see all of these graphs on Euro. Okay? Don't worry about it. And also relevant studies. As I said, dun sa mga members natin ng YouTube, you will get exclusive lectures on some of these. Like each of those books, like Yuan books alone on book alone on China's economic model and miracle, in spite high level of corruption, is something we can discuss forever. It's a fantastic book. In fact, she has another book about how China escaped the poverty trap. So very quickly, let me go to 2 important things here. One is, okay, so anong gagawin natin ngayon? Right? What should be done? Next. And may pag-asa pa ba yan in terms of solutions? Let me also bring out the Kuznets curve on inequality, because may connection din yan sa fighting corruption, in my opinion. Or at least I've seen some studies that do that. But before going that, very quickly, let me suggest at least you guys check 2 important books. Again, John Seidel and Benedict Anderson. Kasika Democracy and Bossism. Very, very important books and works. One is actually an essay, long essay on New Left Review. Later on, wrapped into a longer book about the Philippines and Southeast Asian politics by Benedict Anderson. The other one also naman is a book. And then there's a more recent book, also 3 Revolutions by John Seidel, comparing Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Again, that's a fantastic book. I did a book review of that. You can check that on Mekong Review, published in Sydney, Australia, that I really suggest you guys check out. My goodness, I'm getting late. Hindi ko na mahabol tong gym. Wait, we will get there. Mahirap talagang walang production team. What second lang? I think I overshot. I want to do too many things at the same time, but it's okay. We can spread this out over time. Okay, let me just get out these two important books. Okay, and works rather. So one is by John Seidel, very important book. Seidel or I think Seidel is the correct one. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And the other one is this essay, Cacique Democracy, which later on would be also wrapped into a bigger sets of works by the great Benedict Anderson, who happened to be also his PhD supervisor of John Seidel, if I'm not mistaken, at Cornell University, right? So these are really, really serious thinkers, right? At hindi sila yung mga tipo yung mga nakikita yung mga local analysts na kung ano pinagsasabi na wala naman. No offense. I mean, like, minsan napapaano na lang, na naman tayo, ganun na naman yung level of analysis, hanggang level 1 lang pala, mag-level 5 na dapat tayo by this time Okay, so I'll really summarize this very fast, guys, because I think they deserve their own lecture. So, ang basically sinabi ng, if you put these two works together, the argument is this. It goes back to what Fukuyama called the sequencing dilemma, right? In his work, Political Order and Political Decay. So that's a very... So see, if I connect all of these books together, it's not like I read them in... So if you look at the books Political Order, Political Decay by Fukuyama, it's very interesting. Because the argument of Fukuyama is that if you look at history of nations, it is very important to look at when was democratic election introduced. If democratic elections were introduced at the high level of development, say beyond $6,000 per capita income, I'm using the Adam Zaworski's threshold of democratic consolidation or proofing, then and you have a big middle class, the chances is that you will have very low vote buying and very high levels of political party consolidation, right? Pero, dun sa mga bansa, katulad ng Pilipinas, kung saan democratic elections were introduced at very low levels of development, where the vast majority of the society were poor, and only the few ultra-rich oligarchs from Spanish era to American era. So the Cacique Democracy is a fantastic work because it shows continuity between Spanish era caciques or oligarchs and American era oligarchs, because the Americans, instead of fighting the local oligarchs, just co-opted them. Like, you can find actually the name Singson 1880s pa lang, right? Mga Ver, you can go 250, 300 years back to politics in Batak. I can go on and on with many names. The Rojases, the Lopezes, there are lots of different names there. These are the mestizo class caciques or oligarchs who go way back. And neither the Spanish nor the Americans were able to take them out. If anything, they actually accommodated them and strengthened them. That's the contribution really of the Cacique Democracy thesis. The John Seidel comes in when he really addresses this sequencing issue that Francis Fukuyama brings into picture. So basically, the Francis Fukuyama argument is that if you introduce democratic elections at a very low level of development, where the vast majority of the population is disenfranchised, economically dependent, basically what happens is that warlords / political dynasties, I say / because in many times they have the guns, the goons, and the gold, they will dominate and co-opt the political system. So the curse of the Philippines was that the Americans introduced to us a very late 19th century corrupt form of American politics when we were an extremely poor country, and that allowed for a few families and dynasties to basically have a full grip dun sa ating democratic institution. And why? One of the reasons is that, first, back in the day, for you to even be able to vote, you had to have properties. Then later on, for you to be able to run for office, you had to be rich. Why? Because it's expensive. Why does that matter? Because vote buying and election expenditure means ROI for politicians. Yung mga politiko na sobrang daming ginagastos, lalong-lalo na itong mga matagal na mga political dynasties, mga warlords, maghahanap ng return on investments yan. At dyan nagsisimula tong corruption. Over time, like No Limitang of Rizal, corruption mutates. So it first starts with your traditional oligarchs. Next thing you know, There are new celebrities who come in and try to challenge them. Next thing you know, within the oligarchic family and dynasties, they're split. Minsan yung kabit, kalaban yung wife. Ganito. And then, things get more interesting. Next thing you know, mga contractors, nakasabwat ng mga politiko na to para magkaroon ng ROI, pati sila sumabak na rin. So, naging contractor. Next thing you know, pati yung district engineer. Do you get what I'm saying? So, one of the reasons why corruption is very endemic in the Philippines is because of this fundamental flaw in our system. That we introduce democracy without addressing socio-economic rights issues, without creating a strong middle class first, without creating checks and balances, without creating norms against corruption. So this really brings me to the last part, which is this Kuznets curve. So the Kuznets curve applies to many concepts, environmentalism, inequality, but basically the idea is that at the lower levels of development, right, corruption tends to be high, inequality tends to be high, environmental degradation tends to be high. Pero habang yumayaman ng bansa at lumalaki yung middle class, tumataas yung antas ng edukasyon, medyo lumalalim yung kanilang political literacy, bumababa na itong inequality, corruption, and environment. So the Kuznets curve actually is quite versatile, could be applied to many things. Now, what I don't know is when it will kick in the Philippines, because we're already at around $4,300 per capita in nominal and more than $10,000 PPP. The basic idea is that at some point, pag lumaki ng middle class natin, you will have enough Filipino will say, enough is enough, ayoko ng vote buying. Those of us who are middle class, thank God, we earn enough to say no to vote buying because we can afford it. But are there enough of us? That's the number one question. And for you to have enough of us, it's another big question because it's also a question of are you creating inclusive development, blah, blah. Para sa akin, in theory, I think we have 20 to 30 million solid middle class people. But what we lack, guys, is this. A mobilized middle class that just like the progressive movement in the US in the late 19th century. Kaya kung babasahin mo yung libro ni Fukuyama, Political Order and Political Decay, and especially the first book niya, Origin of Political Order, makita mo na isa sa mga dahilan na there were, in the US, at least in the early 20th century, they were able to deal with corruption, all of that gangs of New York boardwalk empire nonsense is because there was this middle class, strong Protestant value, very moralistic, but also very organized. No, section of the American society na lumaban sa corruption and help the good politicians and make sure the bad politicians are taken out. And that is why, I don't know, Ma'am Lenny is not full member of Mayors for Good Governance, observer status, I don't know what does it mean. Ano siya? ASEAN ba to? ASEAN strategic dialogue partner. I think it will be great if people like Ma'am Lenny just make their own version. Some sort of angat buhay but for all good mayors. Really, really good mayors, right? This is what we need. We need Lenny and more people like Lenny working together, right? Ako para sa akin, kung maingay ka lang sa isang administration lang, pero totally silent ka sa mga ibang administration, wala kang credibility sa akin. Kaya sabi ko, why not look at flood control of Pinoy, Digong, and Marcos? But if you're only for looking at one of them, then may problema tayo dyan. So my suggestion is Lenny just makes her own version, then work, I don't know, with Vico and a couple of other non-DDS or non-soft DDS mayors who would know na talaga maganda kanilang intention. And more importantly, idikit mo yan sa pink movement, a pink 2.0 movement, guys. And then maybe we'll be at this level in the Kuznets curve. As we build up our middle class and economic development, we also in parallel develop that mobilize kind of a movement, isang kilosan. Kasi higher economic growth and bigger number of middle class alone is not enough. You have to activate that. This is the objective versus subjective forces argument. Increasingly nakakaroon tayo ng objective conditions for a better democracy, pero kailangan natin activate yan. And we won't be able to activate that if we rely on people na selective lang outrage or medyo Johnny-come-latelys or medyo questionable, or walang kakayan, or walang moral credibility, or purong pakit lang and padisente lang at walang pag-intindi sa ating sistema at the level that we need. So I really genuinely hope that this really mini lecture compressed version we did today will give you an idea where I'm coming from when I get really worked up, when I keep on saying nothing but moral outrage, because for me, moral outrage alone is useless, if not counterproductive. We have to do more than that. On that note, maraming salamat, guys. Thank you very much for listening to this latest episode ng Meta. Again, I try to keep it as again, compressed version as possible. Doon sa mga tabad na trolls, etc. na hindi nila na-appreciate yung sinasabi natin, good luck. Hopeless case kayo, that's your problem. Pero doon sa ating mga kaibigan who are willing to see where I'm coming from, again, if you end up confused but at a higher level after this discussion, it's a good thing. What I'm saying is that dapat malalim yung pag-intindi natin sa issues na to. Hindi lang corruption per se. Gaano kalalim ang corruption? Anong klaseng corruption? Anong mga paraan na pwede natin gawin para labanan ng corruption? Anong mga ingredients na kailangan para magkaroon tayo ng effective response to corruption? What are the lessons we can learn from other countries? Why other countries who are similar corrupt to us, let's say Thailand in terms of the levels, but actually more economically dynamic, etc. So there are also other explanations for economic development. So in short, do not reduce this to a purely moralistic, posturing, vacuous kind of intervention. Go deeper, go multidimensional, and go for solutions. And if you want solutions, go with the right leaders. Lenny is definitely the right leader. Vico is definitely the right leader. The leaders na hindi soft DDS or soft Dilawan or soft BBMers. No, leaders who are really there for our national interest. And then hopefully one day, we'll have our own version of hopefully nag-peak na yung corruption and we can go on the other side of the Kuznets curve of high growth, high corruption kind of situation. All right? And I really also genuinely hope one day level up din natin yung political economic analysis sa ating bansa because I've just seen so much of mediocrity and whatever. Okay? On that note, thank you very much, guys. Maraming salamat. God bless. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely weekend and blessed Sabbath day tomorrow. Sobrang grabe ang dami nangyari over the past few days. Please check out yung ating interview with the great Justice Ascuna, one of the framers of our Constitution. Marami tayong pinag-usapan. He talked about legally as a jurist, one of the things we can do is we can create a national summit on corruption with the Supreme Court para labanan natin ang corruption, bring in people from different stakeholders group, bring the best experts in the country. Let's organize it. Let's bring the good mayors. Let's do it all, guys. Let's do it all. Kailangan talaga natin yan, guys. We can also adopt, like Britain, certain legal instruments kung saan we can directly sue mga corrupt na politicians. We should be able to do that as citizens. Bakit pa natin hintayin ng ombudsman or sandigan bayan or whatever? We should do it ourselves. We should be able to do it ourselves. Right? So there are also legal solutions. But let's talk about also other solutions. At bantayin din natin ang ombudsman office. Bantayin natin yung interviews, sino pwede maging ombudsman, and let's encourage President BBM to go beyond rhetoric and do something and really put behind bars itong mga kurakot na yan and do really something about it. So, yes, call out. Yes, outrage. But kung hanggang dyan ka lang, sorry about it. Babalik na naman tayo sa zero within a few years. Just like how the Napoles PDAF issue didn't really reach anywhere. Yung ibang senador na andyan pa rin yung isa, yan. Should I even repeat it? Right? Should I even repeat it? For accountability to happen, you have to fight for it. And for accountability to happen, you have to understand the forest. Not